us in the Informer studio, Steve Carey, and he's here to talk to the media. The media has been in the news for almost as long as I can remember, especially in my life. We've gone through this COVID and continuing to go through this COVID crisis in Australia, and there's a chapter every day. Suddenly South Australia is very much in the news again. I'm just wondering, what have you made of how our news teams and our news channels have delivered the message over the last 7-8 months?
It's been a tough task because it's a constantly evolving story, and most rolling news stories, right, have an end cycle.
Yeah,
I think the difficulty with COVID is there's no end in sight. So, you know, when you had 9/11, for example, that was a terrible, terrible tragedy, of course. But even that had a shelf life of, there was the impact, there was the follow-on, there was the dissemination of the news, then 2, 3, 4 weeks and a couple of months later, it was still part of the narrative, but it wasn't leading the bulletin. No. COVID, pretty much every night for months and months and months, has led every bulletin, front pages, radio bulletins. So the challenge has been twofold. One, how do you keep the audience engaged? How do you package that information in an interesting way that keeps people informed and entertained? Because at the end of the day, I've always said news is information wrapped up as entertainment. That doesn't mean to denigrate it, and it doesn't mean low rent. It just simply means that it's got to be informative and packaged to a point where people are engaged enough to take it in. So that's been the challenge with COVID.
What have you made of the television cameras' decision to follow the premiers?
Follow the premiers in what way?
Follow the premiers. When in the opening days of the crisis, we saw 2 premiers, Daniel Andrews and Gladys Berejiklian, emerge as these 2 news figures because they had important information for both their states.
And now Anastasia Palaszczuk has followed suit.
Mark McGowan,
yes.
Steve Marshall,
Yep.
and on and on and on. What have you made of all that? I've never seen that before in my life.
Neither have I, and I think we've touched on it before, but what it's done is it's pulled the veil back from what happens at a media conference. Ordinarily, you get, for a 30-minute media conference, you get maybe 15, 20 seconds of what the Premier actually said. So you're trusting the journalist to interpret the information the right way. And I think what COVID has done is lift that back, because a lot of these press conferences are being taken live. So people are at home, they're in lockdown, particularly in Victoria.
Or South Australia.
Or South Australia, which is happening now. So they're getting that information unfiltered. Now, for the conspiracy theorists, that means that it's a golden opportunity to interpret it however they want. It also casts a spotlight on journalists and how hard their task is to winnow down 30 minutes for a 1-minute 10, 1-minute 20 story. So that comes with experience, and that's where we come to this idea that journalism matters, and people who have experience from credible sources and newsrooms are very important in that process, because anybody can interpret anything. You look at daily news ratings. You can interpret whether you've won a certain demo, you can interpret whether you've lost on the raw data. So it really becomes a matter of
demographic in between.
Yes, but
we won the 20-year-olds, we lost the 30-year-olds, but we won the 50-year-olds.
Sure. So it becomes a matter of trust. Who do you trust? And that becomes also then a spotlight on the presenters. And you know that because you've been one. So you know how important it is that the audience trusts what you're saying, because you become the figurehead for that entire organisation. So COVID has presented a lot of challenges. I think by and large, the media's done a good job. You'd expect me to say that, but I do think they've done a good job under very challenging circumstances.
I've been challenged by the tone and the constant, I can't keep up with the drama. For me, there is a time, and we talk about natural flow. You've got to give people a chance to breathe. You can't keep them. And we talk about the mental impact, the mental health impact of this media. And I think we've contributed. And I try and not be too harsh, because we have a great many fellow professionals.
No, sorry, George. We have every right to be harsh. We have every right to call out, whether they're friends or not.
Yeah.
We should trust that our friends know that where we're coming from in a professional sense is it's not playing the man or the woman. No. It's calling out the professionalism of those colleagues we still know. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is people sniping from the sides who don't know the amount of work and effort and grunt that goes into making a story. I get very inflamed by that. When they think, oh, well, it's just voodoo magic. We throw all this stuff up in the air and all of a sudden there's a story. That's not the way it happens. If we think that people are not doing the job correctly, they should be called out. Like, that's the function of Media Watch. I mean, that's sort of religious viewing for me. Don't always get it right, of course. How can you? You're human. But when you make a mistake, you need to own up to it, particularly in the media. So I don't think we need to worry ourselves too much. And if we've got friends who take umbrage at the fact that we're calling them out, and we haven't yet, but if we take umbrage at that, then where do we sit as professionals ourselves?
Now, I was just going to throw something at you. You mentioned I was a former news anchor. You know why they call them anchors, don't you?
Why?
Because at the first sign of trouble, they toss you over the side. and I say that because we're not likely to see anybody or any newsroom at the moment shift, because they're all in their particular time slots winning their viewership. And that means that they have very little chance of changing their spots.
Look, we call them rusted-on viewers. And rusted-on viewers are very hard to shift. And that means, and as a former news director, that means you have to take risk. And news directors and journalists are particularly, because, the way you brought it, you're particularly risk-averse. If you're that close to winning, do you try something radical? And if you're winning, do you then try something different again to maintain that lead? Yeah. It's a really fine line. It's a very, very hard thing to do.
I understand the component that says, or the part of the argument that says, stay the course, believe in the system.
You've got to have executives that give you the chance to stay the course.
Well, Channel 9 is fighting very hard in its breakfast shift in the Today Show to try and regather some of that energy that it had a number of years ago. And then, of course, we saw it fall by the side. They changed as you said, the anchors, and it didn't make much headway. In fact, it started to really slip away, and suddenly they had to return to Karl Stefanovic. Mind you, I think he's found a partner that they work together in a very seamless fashion, and that to me is a bit of a secret.
Yeah, it's chemistry.
Yeah, it's a very special thing.
And that's what's important, but that's not just on TV, that's in life, or your business partner, or who you deal with, or your friendship group. You've got to have that repartee or that communal feel, or whatever you want to call it. You've got to be engaged by those people. You've got to be interested in them. So that's what I think they bring. That's why good presenters are paid the money they're paid, because they are the link, they're the bridge to all the work that goes on behind the scenes. They're the bridge into someone's lounge room, because when you're watching television particularly, you're inviting you into the lounge room. So it's a critical step, and that comes with experience.
In the years that you've been working, and especially in those days when you were reporting, just before we finish, I want you to reflect on and give us a sense of how television has changed. You were I think, reporting on a summit. Yeah. Was it in Russia?
I was reporting on the Bush and Gorbachev super summits around
Moscow.
1990s. In Moscow.
In Moscow. So tell the story.
So the story is, we had just myself, a cameraman and a sound man, and one little battery light on Red Square. That was it.
That was it. No
for our broadcast. We then were waiting, and CBS flew in a Starlifter aircraft with 30 tons of lighting gear to light up St Basil's Church in Red Square. So therefore, we not only got a great backdrop, we hung off the coattails of them, but what they were doing was they were saying to their audience back home, St Basil's, Red Square equals Moscow, Russia. Yeah. It was a visual, but it was also theatre. Authentic. And
authentic
it was
theatre.
Of course. Yeah. And that's what we need to be brave enough here. Let's break the mould a little bit. So to all the news directors out there who are struggling and doing a great job, break the mould.
Steve Carey has told you how to advance the game. All right, Steve Carey, as usual, a delight to catch you up, especially at this time. And the last thing I want to leave you with is this. Can we put to bed once and for all that line, we're all in this together?
You do it, because we're not all in it together.
We're not in this together, but we are experiencing the same storm. Yeah?
Yep.
Thank you.
Well put.